Hey guys, welcome back to the preview show. As always, I'm your host, Nico. I'm joined today with Hunter in the studio. We're really excited for the Preserve Championship to kick off this weekend. But first, how you doing, Hunter?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be back. Trevor's gone, obviously, this week, but, he'll be back for the next one. So it's good to be back in the studio.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and go into the course preview. There are a couple changes out here in Minnesota. We are playing at Black Bear again in Clearwater. Hole 5 looks like they completely redesigned it. It's going to be a new wooded par 3, 275 feet. In order to make room for this, hole 13 in the previous year has gotten removed. The MPO division now plays hole 14 as a par 5 from the previous hole 13 tee pad, and the FPO division will now play hole 14 from the previous MPO tee pad. Hole 10 has a new basket placement for the MPO. They brought it in about 122 feet, so it moved it from 1,280 feet to 1,158. Hole 12 looks like it's going to play the same as last year, but the Mando has been removed from the FPO division. Hole 15 plays very similar, but it has a new tee pad and a mandatory Mando close to the tee. And then on 17, it's going to have OB left as well as the water behind the basket. Hunter, what do you think these course changes are going to do to our players this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of changes, but it feels like most of them aren't going to affect it too much. Mm-hmm. I like the addition of hole 5. Like, I like adding a little more woods to the course in general. I know that like hole 17, I think, is the other tunnel shot that was mentioned here. I like having more kind of like wooded. It looked like hole 5 to me was kind of a wooded tunnel shot. I didn't look at a practice round. I was just looking at the course map, so that could be an incorrect statement, but I like the addition of stuff like that because this is an old golf property, so it has some of those like golf-esque aspects, and I think whenever you can have like 17 is an easy hole on a wooded course, but it ends up being a challenging hole out here because of how the rest of the course plays. You get up to that hole and it feels like almost a must make, and you're like, shoot, I haven't really had to hit a tight gap all day. Now you do. So I kind of like the addition of that on the front nine too, but all in all, I don't think it'll change the overall scores too much. It could play, it seems like most of the changes are making holes slightly harder. So we could see it play like a stroke or two harder, but the field's gotten better. Yeah. So I think the overall scores will probably be pretty similar. And the thing that Preserve's kind of always done, I used to not like it this much. If you go back to Grip Lock a few years ago, I think it might have been the year Nico won, or probably the year before. The course was getting shredded a little bit, and there wasn't that much course or score separation. And at the time, it wasn't the only one on tour. And so I was like, I don't really understand where this fits, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, the tour's gotten a lot harder. And the scoring here has come down. I think last year's winner averaged, it wasn't even 11 under per round. So the scoring average has come down, but that stroke separation still isn't there. And I kind of like that now because there's so many events where the stroke separation is there that when you come into a weekend like this, it really kind of goes in the favor of who's throwing the best. And it ends up like, yeah, there's still potential for stroke swings. There's a lot of OB out there. Most of it's not super in play, but there are some holes that it's definitely in play. Yeah. But it makes it for an exciting weekend, almost guaranteed, where we're probably in MPO or FPO going to come down to the last hole, and there's a solid chance of a playoff. Mm-hmm. So I like that.
Especially on hole 17, the water behind the basket, whenever you're trying to navigate like a wooded shot, most of these people are very comfortable with doing that, but giving themselves maybe a long look for a putt. Now that they have the OB left with the water in the back, that hole is going to make things a lot more interesting because it's going to play that much more of an important role, being that much more difficult.
It's interesting. So in disc golf, what's interesting to me is this hole and the other hole 17 that is a deal breaker that comes to mind is USDGC. Both of them play short. Both of them look like, if you just look at the shot and you think, I take 90% of the touring pros and just put them on this hole any normal day, they're birdieing it every time. Like, if you take the hay bales and the pressure away from USDGC and you just put a player on it, yeah, the pros are never missing it. But once you add, especially that final round pressure, you add, hey, I have a one-stroke lead, you start to have all these factors, and an easy hole becomes a lot harder. And what I like about the water behind the basket is, I'm sure you felt this as everyone listening as just a disc golfer, where if there's a tight gap, sometimes it feels like you focus on hitting the gap and you forget about distance control, or you focus on distance control and you forget about hitting the gap.
Yep.
And with that water behind, it's so crucial to have both. And now with the OB left as well, it just adds another thing that even if it's not that in play for a player, they don't feel like, it's at least something else they're thinking about.
Right.
To where you have a lot to think about, and a short par 3 can become the deciding hole on hole 17. And then hole 18, I don't believe, was changed, which means that, there's still a chance of like pushing on hole 18. So if it comes knotted up into 18, you're in for an electric finish.
Yeah. So luckily for these players, it doesn't look like the weather's going to be too much of a factor. It's supposed to be like light winds, very sunny. So I do expect a lot of high scoring rounds out there. So that's going to be fun to watch. Going into our storyline segment, Ricky kind of had a uncharacteristic finish last week, finishing in 18th in Des Moines. Hope I said that right.
You did.
Thank you.
Desmonez is how I prefer to pronounce it, but it's okay.
But this week, I don't feel like people should be doubting him too much. This is an event that he pretty much finishes in the top 1, 2, 3 in years past. How do you think that Ricky is going to play this weekend?
You can never count Ricky out, but there is something to be said in disc golf about players just having good vibes with the course. That seems to be Ricky's case here. There's a lot of guys I think that this course also suits very well, so I'm not going to say Ricky is 100% going to win this thing, but a podium is likely in the cards. It's very, very much doable for Rick, and it won't surprise me. I think that if you've been following disc golf for a while, you look at the modern day leaderboard and it feels weird. You see Gannon Burr jumping up and down all over the place. You see Ricky up and down all over the place. You see players missing cash and then coming back the next week and being in top 5. That doesn't feel normal. That is the new normal. So this is like, our scoreboards nowadays look a lot more like golf's scoreboard. I've been following golf a lot more this year, and you watch it and like, I went to a PGA event in May, and one of my favorite players, Jordan Spieth, wanted to see him play. He missed the cut. He is still like a top 5 golfer in the world right now, and he missed the cut at one of the in disc golf Elite Plus events is what it would have been. That's a normal thing in golf, and that's becoming a normal thing in disc golf. How a player deals with the course, like courses that fit a player's game, mean a lot more nowadays. And all-around players, they can have weekends where they pop off and win, but an all-around player is a lot of times going to end up being like a 25th guy week in and week out, and that's crazy good nowadays.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like that a few years ago. Ricky, I think, is an all-around player that has certain courses that he's just really comfortable at, this being one of them. Another thing that plays in Ricky's favor is one of these courses as well, happens to be where Worlds is at this year, up at GMC. So I think Ricky could do very well here. I think he's still going to be in contention for maybe not player of the year, but I think his name will be in the hat a little bit by the end of it. I don't think he'll end up being the player of the year, but I think that it could all start here with a really good weekend.
So as long as his limes doesn't flare up this week, then we're chilling.
Yes, that's always the question mark in the back of everyone's head. I'm sure his too, but it does seem, I don't know much about Lyme's disease at this stage that he has it at, but it does seem like a flare-up is not a super common thing, and once it's under control, it stays under control for a little bit, but it's also unpredictable, so that could be something where you think that, and then it's just right back the next week, but who knows.
Someone else that has been dealing with an injury is Eagle McMahon. Mm-hmm. He had to withdraw, unfortunately, in the Portland Open. This week, he is actually still registered as of this morning. Last week he DQ'd, or he didn't play at all. Is this week a week that you would expect him to kind of just focus on staying healthy? Do you think he should be playing for a win here and set himself up for a dominant European, what would you call it?
Swing, something?
Yeah, something like that.
It's a tough one because Eagle had said he was going to be coming back around this time. I think he originally anticipated being back a little earlier, but he anticipated he's going to be back. He was only going to be out a few weeks. Yeah. I'm not a doctor by any means, so I don't fully know what's going on with Eagle, but when you see a player that has a nagging injury that has knocked them out for a considerable amount in the past, and you see them re-injure it, in my opinion, don't rush to come back. I mean,
especially an injury that forced you to change like your disc golf game in general.
But with that being said, he was injured where he wasn't really playing much at all in one European Open last year, basically backhand only. So if you can go out and play like that and it doesn't farther injure you, then yeah, I mean, this is a course. The Preserve doesn't seem to be a really forehand dominant course. Doesn't seem like lefties and forehand dominant players are the ones killing it out here. It seems like the player that keeps it in the fairway is the one that's killing it out here. So this is a course that Eagle McMahon could see success at. But when you're at the point in Eagle's career that you are, where week in and week out, when you show up, your name is thrown in the hat of suspected winners, you don't really want to do much to taint that. So if I were him, and he might be at this point, I'm not coming back until I'm 100% confident that I'm going to be throwing pain-free. I'm not going to have to be... Now, I'd come back when I still couldn't throw forehand to my level because that's probably never going to happen again. But if he can throw backhands pain-free, throw it like 80, 90% power and not feel like he's risking re-injuring it, then yeah, he's ready to come back. If he can't and he's like, I'm going to just go out there and just kind of smooth stuff 50, 60%, no, it's not time to come back yet. But I don't know what's going on in Eagle's head. If he's coming back, we just have to trust that, yeah, it's time.
He also whipped out that lefty backhand, which was...
He does have a good lefty backhand. He does have a really good lefty backhand.
Made me really self-conscious there. So the next headline, we got Gannon. He finally takes down another Elite Series event. His first one was the Open at Austin, and that was back in March. Another player that we've seen kind of struggle to get another win is Calvin. And his last one was in Jonesboro in late April. So the question is the field in MPO getting more difficult, or are these players underperforming? Which would you rather? Which one?
I think it's definitely the field's getting better. Because so if you look at the two seasons, they're drastically different in my opinion. Gannon seems to not be nearly as consistent of a player as Calvin. So since his win, I think he literally came in like 50 at the DDO the week before he won Des Moines last week.
Yep.
Gannon seems to be a player, and this is probably still like a maturity level thing with his game, where if he feels like he can't win it, he almost feels like, what's the point of me being out here? That's the vibe I've gotten from Gannon. He even, I think in the Trevor Staub show interview, told Trevor something along those lines of like he has a hard time focusing once he realizes he's out of it. Like he has a hard time, like he wants that pressure of fighting for a win. And I think you can see that in his results. So you can never, ever count Gannon out of a tournament until round 1 or 2 is over. So going into every event, Gannon has all the skills that he could win, but you do have to take his low finishes with a grain of salt. But they are still low finishes, and at the end of the day, I think the player of the year isn't going to be just about number of wins, but it's also going to have consistency factor it. Now, if a player has like 3 more wins than another player, then yeah, that's all that matters. Mm-hmm. But it is something to be said. So Gannon, I think, is somewhat underperforming. Calvin is not underperforming. I think since his win, I don't think he's come outside the top 10, but he has like 3 podiums, including one last week. And I think that is what the best player in the world looks like. It's a player that week in and week out is going to put themselves at least in the conversation. They're out there. They're not going to really slip up too much. And yeah, they might not put themselves in a conversation as far as a win goes every week, but your name's going to be on the tongue going into the week and coming out of it of like another solid top 10 from Calvin, another solid top 15 from Calvin. And that's where Calvin's at. So Calvin's not underperforming by any means. The field is just that strong that Calvin, if Calvin played like this a few years ago, he's probably looking at like a Kristen Tatar season. But the field's gotten so much better that instead we're looking at a Calvin Heimberg season, which is still best player in the world.
And we're just going to clarify, we're talking about Elite Series and major events. We know that they've won other like A tiers, but we're focused on Elite Series here. Going on to FPO, the biggest headline I think we would both agree on is the Natalie Ryan lawsuit with the Disc Golf Pro Tour and the PDGA. I'm really good at words.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
In California, we saw at OTB some of the big names in FPO were saying that they were going to leave the event should Natalie play. Now that Natalie, it looks like Natalie will be allowed to play, and there is no lawyer that could walk out on the course and kick her off. Does the weight of the event need to be reevaluated if said FPO players end up leaving?
No, I mean, not this year, obviously. we kind of predicted this might happen on Grip Lock. We were talking back at OTB because around the time OTB went on, there was a case, I believe it was in powerlifting in Minnesota, that kind of set precedent for this to be able to happen. And so I agree by the wording of the Pro Tour. It doesn't seem like they're going to try to appeal it. I feel like they worded it similarly in OTB and still tried to appeal it and won that appeal. So it'll be interesting to see today and tomorrow if anything comes out about the Pro Tour's response. But initial signs are pointing to they're basically just saying this is what it is. The Pro Tour statement said we disagree with the decision, but we'll comply with the decision. And so I think it is what it is. It'll be interesting to see how the FPO field reacts, because what in OTB we had, I believe it was called the Stockton Declaration. I forget what it was exactly. It was
I'm
titled,
surprised you remember the title. It was so long.
It was a while ago. Yeah, it was a long title, but it was, I don't remember past Stockton Declaration, so it doesn't matter. But basically it was signed by a huge chunk of the FPO field. And it was a stance against Natalie Ryan and transgender women in the FPO field. One of the key names on that document, who has since also backed it up on Tour Life, was Kristen Tatar. Kristen has been one of the few FPO players to actually be vocal and saying like she disagreed, and she did it in a very, very respectful way. If you haven't watched the Tour Life podcast, I interview with her. I highly recommend it. It's one of their more popular interviews as well. But she's the player I think that this kind of hinges on if the movement, if there even is a movement, makes noise. Because we did hear rumblings. So first off that happened at OTB was the women in FPO that were against this wore, I believe it was black and white. They wore some type of color in solidarity or against it. They, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but that was the visual protest day one. And then there was rumblings that if the appeal didn't go through, they were all going to walk. That is, I think, kind of what's at question here is, will that happen again? I haven't heard any rumblings of that yet, so I'm not really expecting it. But again, I think most of it hinges on Kristen Tatar, because if Kristen walks, then that devalues the entire event. Not to say Katrina Allen and Sarah Hokum and, Kona Panis, Valerie Mandahano, there was a lot of good caliber players that signed this document. Them walking devalues the event, but it doesn't necessarily devalue the win. Kristen walking devalues the win, whoever that is, whether it's Paige, whether it's Natalie, whether it's Holland Handley or whoever.
That's any week that Kristen isn't there. It's like, correct. Well, Kristen wasn't there. So.
Exactly. So that's the power that Kristen herself has. So if that were to happen, then yeah, it changes the full dynamic of this weekend's event. But I'm curious if Kristen seems to be a competitor through and through. I'm curious if she would see the walkout. I'm curious how she would view the walkout. If she would view it as, to a certain extent, giving up and letting Natalie win. Maybe not necessarily win the event, but basically saying like, I don't know if Kristen would view it as, I don't think I can win, so I'm walking out, or she's standing up and for what she believes in and walking away. Either way, it's going to be an interesting week. The Pro Tour's posts all already have comments turned off in regards to this, which I've disagreed with censorship from the beginning. I understand that there are things said in the comments both directions that are not necessarily nice, but I think that you need an open discourse in general, and it is what it is. I disagree with the Pro Tour's censorship on that standpoint, and I'm imagining that if Natalie Ryan gets on coverage, that censorship will happen again. It'll be a very interesting weekend regardless of what happens, but I think it all hinges on Kristen Tatar's response. I also think this will fuel Paige Pierce quite a bit, because that's what we saw at OTB, is Paige was motivated by the outside factor of wanting to have a platform to speak from, and she knew a good performance gave her that platform. It'll be interesting to see if a similar thing happens here. But Kristen could be fueled by the same thing. Kristen doesn't seem to be like go out and seek to make her opinion on this heard. It's more so when asked, she's not going to turn down a question. Right. So I don't think she will, if Kristen wins, use it as an opportunity to make some big statement. But I could see it being her playing with a chip on her shoulder. And as we saw last week, when Kristen's angry, she can do things that is very impressive on the disc golf course.
I definitely don't think that, going back to if she walks off, the reasoning behind it, I definitely don't think that it would be that she thinks that she can't win. Like, we know, even with Natalie Ryan in the field, she wins. She
Yes.
can do whatever she wants.
I'm saying more so like if she would be worried that that's the perception it'll give off, is like, is it like...
Okay. I think she's made her legacy known.
I agree.
So I don't feel like she needs to worry about that.
I agree. I fully agree. I think both players, Natalie and the players that are, standing up against Natalie, as long as it's in a respectful way, there has been non-respectful things from both sides. As long as it's in a respectful way, need to protest, need to make their voice heard, because they both want change of some way, shape, or form, some type. And I think it's good to stand up for what you believe in and good to stand up for the change. And the way that the FPO players that are against this did it at OTB was great. I think the declaration they signed and, showing up, playing, but wearing colors to say, hey, I'm making myself, this is me standing up visually saying I'm against it. Let's get to disc golf. I like that. A walk-off, at times that is necessary. And I think that also fits in this, because you're not threatening anyone. You're not coming after anyone. You're not saying anything degrading. You're saying, I'm so against this, I'm willing to turn down a paycheck, not even play. I think that would speak volumes, but I don't know if it doesn't feel like in the disc golf world, this has the same shock value and all that the initial OTB one did. Right. So I'll be curious if it elicits the same response the OTB one did.
But if Kristen does, then it's going to be...
If Kristen walks, yes, then that storyline becomes the storyline of the event.
Yeah. So last time at, I think we said OTB, when Natalie Ryan was in the midst of her legal troubles with the PDGA and the DGBT, we saw that she, after the first round, was one stroke back of the lead. Mm-hmm. Do you think that with Natalie playing now, she's going to pose a threat to Kristen at this course?
To Kristen, that's up to Kristen. Kristen, regardless, Natalie in the field, Natalie not in the field, is the best FPO player. But this course, I think, does suit Natalie Ryan's game well, because it's not really a putter's course that much. When I was looking at last year's stats, it was very heavily on staying in bounds, fairway hit percentage, and basically tee to green was a big stat. Those are kind of the big stats. Where in the past, Natalie has struggled, it seemed, is more so on the putting green. She has a lot of distance, and if she can keep the disc in bounds, that'll bode well out there. So she could get in contention, and she could push Paige and Kristen. And I think that's what she's going to want to do, because she wants to make her presence known.
Looking at Natalie Ryan's disc golf career, while she hasn't been playing on the Pro Tour, she is allowed to play A tiers. Mm-hmm. And so she's won 5 out of the 6, I think, that she's played.
Yeah.
So, it's not like Natalie is not able to win anything.
No,
you don't think that's going to play anything? Like, you don't think she's on some kind of hot streak?
I think that she is capable of winning, but the same as the rest of FPO field, I think that it's Kristen's decision who wins. If Kristen doesn't show up, if Kristen doesn't play to her top level, then yeah, Natalie Ryan, Paige Pierce, Holland Hanley, Ella Hansen, Missy Gannon, that's my list that's right behind her on this course. But they're behind her on this course. I think that this course plays well for Kristen's game. I think it plays well to her strengths, and every course plays well to her game, to be completely honest. And I think it's really just what Kristen shows up. If Kristen beats herself, then yeah, Natalie Ryan could easily walk away with this thing. I think that a lot of players are coming into this week motivated by this in one way or another, whether they're motivated against it or motivated for it. So I think you're going to see specifically Paige Pierce, Natalie Ryan, possibly Kristen Tatar.
When you say motivated, are you meaning like to speak on the matter of Natalie Ryan, like being able to play?
Well, Natalie Ryan, yeah. So I think Natalie Ryan is obviously motivated because she wants to make her presence known. She wants to be on lead card. She wants to win. Right. Paige Pierce wants a platform to speak. We saw that at OTB, and the best way to have that platform is to win and put yourself in contention. The players against it, I think Kristen Tatar, you want to be able to come out and be like, look, I'm not speaking from a place that I'm worried about me losing. I'm speaking from a place of, I just won, I just beat, I'm still against it.
What I think what's right for the sport. Like that.
Yeah, that's where Kristen would come from, is like, this is what I think's right for the sport. I'm not worried about me. Look, I just beat, I just won. I'm not worried about me. I think that's where Katrina Allen, we haven't heard much from her. I think that's the type of motivation she'll have, and a lot of the other players that signed the document. So I think a lot of players are coming into this week with a chip on their shoulder to validate what they're saying and prove to the world that I'm not saying this because I'm threatened. And then the other side of the argument, you have Natalie, Paige, other players like I believe Ella Hansen, Maria Oliva have come out in support. I believe they have. And you have those players that are more so they want to play well to have a platform to speak on what they think's right for the sport.
Yeah.
So a lot of players are playing with a chip on their shoulder this week, which on this course, it doesn't have a ton of stroke separation when it's all said and done. As a fan, it's probably going to create an electric disc golf atmosphere scoring wise.
Do you think the cards could be awkward?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing as like when, not to rehash Nico's past, but like when Nico would have an outburst and there's players that players don't want to play with. Yeah. Natalie Ryan is a polarizing figure in the FPO field, and some cards are not going to want to play with her, and no conversation will be had on those cards.
Yeah.
And that just is what it is. But that happens in every field. If you put Brody and Paul on a card, they're not going to talk to each other. So that happens in every field for a number of reasons. So there's always awkward cards out there.
Yeah, so it should be interesting to watch.
Yes.
Last week we saw Haley King. She DNF'd from Des Moines, or she DNF'd from... Was it Des Moines?
It was Des Moines.
Yeah, it was Des Moines. Okay.
Because she won DDO.
Yeah, I was about to say DDO, and I was like, wait, that's not right. Yeah, so she DNF'd from Des Moines due to what some speculate as an injury. I looked on her Instagram, and I haven't seen like her clarify if it's an injury. She just said she didn't want to talk about it. But she says that she is going to be back for the Preserve this week. Do you think it's smart for her to be back after a week, if it is an injury, to try and push herself back out?
Well, there's no, if she could have just jammed a finger and you're back in 2 days. So injury wise, it depends on the scope of it. I will say, I believe at DDO, she was holding her arm some.
Yeah. Which
would make you think that she tweaked something at DDO because it was still aggravated at Des Moines. If that's the case, then again, it's so hard to tell. I'm hoping that they're all, and it seems like most players do, are using like Seth Muncie from Disc Golf Strong or someone outside of them to advise them as far as like you're ready to be back playing or take a week off. Because previously what we would see in disc golf, I don't know how we didn't see more injuries in disc golf previously, but there wasn't those resources to be used. And so players were just going on feel. And like, if you tweaked your knee and you felt like you could push through the next tournament, you did. And some players that led to more serious injuries.
Yeah.
That's what you're always worried about is like, what is this injury? How much can I push it? And is there a risk of it farther sidelining me? If that risk is present and you're at a place in your career like Haley King realistically is, where she's probably comfortable to sit back for a tournament or two, then you might need to do that. But if you're talking to friends, family, and hopefully a doctor or physical therapist or someone in the field, and they're like, look, you're not going to injure it farther, you're good to go, it was just XYZ, or if it's just something off the course, then yeah, it's the player's decision at the end of the day. It just would depend on the scope of the injury.
Yeah, I hope that it's not going to be like an Eagle McMahon kind of situation, because Eagle, when he got injured, was, I would say, nearing the peak, nearing a height of his career where he was starting to dominate consistently, kind of how we're seeing Calvin right now. Like, he was just always in contention.
Yeah.
And then he hurt himself, and then when he finally got back, he started playing, but then he re-injured it. And I would hate to see Haley King, she just won DDO, I would hate to see her be winning and then start hurt and then think she's good and then hurt it even more.
Yeah,
whatever it is.
It's vital, and you never know with what injuries, because Kristen Tatar played last year injured, was dominant, got surgery in the offseason, came back, she's dominant.
Baller.
So it just depends so much on the injury, because then you have like Valerie Mandujano, seemed like just a basic ankle sprain. I believe there's going to be more information coming out in the I think it's called like Mandujano or something on DGN. It seems like they did a documentary almost on her injury. But seemed like just a basic ankle sprain, and now here we are months and months later, and she's just coming back. Like, she's just back as of like a few tournaments.
She's not doing bad.
Yeah, she's doing fine. She's picking up where she left off. But there's different athletes need different treatments, and you gotta work with someone outside of yourself, because as an athlete, your drive is to compete, and you're going to overexert yourself and push yourself if it's up to your own devices, because if you feel like you can play, why wouldn't you play? But sometimes that's just not the smartest decision. So hopefully Haley King is working with someone on whatever, if it is an injury, whatever that injury is, and she is cleared to play and is ready to be back because this course could suit her very well. This could be another one that she pushes for a win at.
Yeah, we'll be watching her this weekend. We're going to go ahead and go into our bold predictions presented by Third Wave Coffee. Hunter, what do you got to tell us about Third Wave?
Yeah, so Third Wave is committed to ethical and sustainable sourcing for all of their coffee. And plus, they have 20 single origin coffees from all over the world in stock right now. I think sometimes people don't realize what committed to ethical and sustainable sourcing means, but essentially, a lot of coffee in the mass marketplace ends up not being fair to, and by fair, I mean like paying people in dirt to actually grow, harvest, all of that, the coffee, and they pay a middleman well, and the farmers aren't treated very well. And Third Wave, as well as a number of other coffee shops in the country, but Third Wave is committed to making sure that that's not true, that the farmer gets their fair share, the farmer is treated well, and the result of it is you have farmers who are really passionate about what they're doing, really passionate about pushing the coffee to the next level, and that's what's really Third Wave's focus is finding those farmers, finding the people who are passionate, and following the coffee from crop to cup. How about that? Maybe that should be the new Third Wave tagline.
Crop to cup.
But because what you don't realize a lot of times about coffee is the way it's grown, the environment it's grown, the altitude it's grown at, the way it's processed, all the way down to now the way it's roasted, all of that changes the flavor in your cup. And that is what Third Wave is focused on. They're committed to. And if you want to try what this coffee tastes like, one of the best entry ways to do that is the Bogey Bros blend, which was actually tasted and approved by myself, Trevor, and Connor. I've been drinking it for months now. Absolutely love it. Or if you're more into the specialty coffee world, you can check out the 20 plus single origin coffees, which instead of being a blend is just an Ethiopian natural or just some coffee from Brazil or whatever like that. And in addition to all of that, you can get 20% off your order with the code DISCGOLF, one word DISCGOLF. So head over to third-wave.coffee today and pick up some coffee.
You sound like you care about your coffee.
I care a lot about my coffee, and I also care about my brother. It's his coffee shop. I worked there for several years, and it's a fantastic place.
All right, so what's your bold prediction?
My bold prediction is we're going to go MPO and FPO winners will have a combined 0 OB strokes. I think the winner of MPO and FPO, they will not go OB. That's my bold prediction. There's a lot of OB out there to be found, but I think that fairway hit, there's not a lot of scoring separation historically, and fairway hits is like the separating stat, and I think that's going to be true this week.
That would be wild.
Well, it's supposed to be bold, Yeah,
that's bold. That's bold.
Yeah.
Trevor didn't send me a bold prediction.
He did not send a bold prediction. That's Trevor's bold prediction.
Oh, good job, Trevor. So we're going to go into MPO. I'll let you share your MPO, and then I'll share Trevor's, and then you can just kind of comment on that.
Yeah. So my MPO top 3, I was looking at last year. Bradley Williams took it down last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Europe this year. He's going to be back. So I was trying to think, is there a Bradley Williams type player that is on a hot streak? My answer is yes. I think Isaac Robinson fits that bill. So I'm taking Isaac Robinson to take it down, but I'm not a crazy person, so I'm putting Ricky Wysocki second because I think he's probably the more likely one to win, to be completely honest with you. But I'm riding with Isaac Robinson first, Ricky Wysocki second, and of course Calvin Heimberg third because I'm not risking losing points.
Okay, so I'm going to renege on the Trevor having a bold prediction because he did not have Ricky Wysocki in his top
there you
3.
go. There's his bold prediction.
That's ridiculous. So his first place pick is one that I can see. Simon Lizotte. His number 2 is going to be Gannon coming off that dub. And then third is Calvin.
Yeah, I thought a lot about Gannon and I thought about Simon. Simon's been having kind of an all over the place year. And so this is a thrower's course. I've said that probably 50 times this podcast. That typically lines up for Simon, but I don't know, my gut didn't like it. Gannon, I feel like this is a course you need to get out hot on. And as we talked about earlier this podcast, when Gannon doesn't, he tends to pull back. So that's what worries me about Gannon is I think if he doesn't come out first round and get himself in contention, then he's done.
Okay. I see Simon being more of a reliable, consistent player if, and this is my bold prediction, if MVP gets a reliable 12 speed. That's my take.
All right. Wow.
What about your, do you want to do FPO or Dark Horse first?
Let's go Dark Horse.
All right, let's go.
This Dark Horse pick, I don't really know why I like him so much for this, but I do. I think that he's a pretty consistent fairway hitter. He's done pretty good at several courses that's kind of required. He's also done not so good at several courses that's kind of required, but I'm riding with him. He had a great finish at Des Moines, and I'm just going to stick with him, Mr. Gavin Babcock.
Oh, my God.
My dark horse.
I like that. Trevor is going with the dark horse.
Yeah.
Mr. Brody Smith.
That's a good pick for this weekend. Yeah. He has a lot of distance. It all just depends. Is he keeping the disc in bounds? That's going to be Brody's question mark out there. But if he does, I mean, he's been having a great season so far.
Yeah, I feel like what's killing him is I know he took that birdie, quad, bogey, and then that birdie.
Consistency is Brody's kryptonite right now.
We've seen that he can get birdies. The question is if he can limit the bogeys.
Yeah, if he keeps it clean, I mean, he could be a top 5 guy out there this weekend, no doubt. But I don't know.
We'll just have to see.
I'm just rolling with Gavin Babcock.
So for FPO, Trevor's got Kristen in first, as you should.
Yeah.
Then he's got Paige, and then Ella Hansen.
I have the same one, too. I have Kristen Tatar, Paige Pierce second. I'm going Missy Gannon third. I like Missy here.
Okay.
Ella Hansen, I don't think this is quite a distance course as much as it seems. And also, I've been burned several times.
Yeah. Do you remember the last time you said it's not going to be? Okay,
I do.
I just wanted to.
I do. I don't want to bring it back up. I like Paige Pierce here, though. Again, I think she has a chip on her shoulder with the Natalie Ryan case coming into this weekend. And I think sometimes it takes an outside factor like that to reignite the passion, which was dropping on Friday, restock, passion inside of Paige Pierce. And, you know, I don't think it's going to be quite enough to overtake Kristen, but I think it'll put her in contention.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning into the preview show. Get out and watch the Preserve Championship presented by Prodigy, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.